Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan, and today we need to talk about a pretty troubling situation with the Seattle Kraken, their horrible start to the NHL season, and big changes that could be coming if this losing continues. Now, the Seattle Kraken have pretty much played like an expansion team up to this point with a 3-6-1 record, but coming into this year, expectations were high and a ton of people had them as a playoff team, and although it would be pretty much impossible to replicate Vegas's energy and success in their first season, Seattle was looked at as a team that could do some major damage, but that's been the opposite of what we've seen so far. But when it comes to Seattle, how bad have they been truly? What is wrong with the Seattle Kraken right now, and what changes could we see if these struggles continue? Watch till the end for all the trade rumors and all the Seattle Kraken breakdowns, and make sure to hit that subscribe button if you are new. 60% of the people that are watching are not subscribed. If you like hockey, this channel is the place to be. Now, to be honest, it might just be like 55% who aren't subscribed, so for the new subscribers of the past couple weeks, appreciate you guys hopping on the train. But we need to talk about the Seattle Kraken team that has been majorly disappointing this year, and to be honest, looking back on expectations, obviously, I don't think many people had them being better or around the same level as the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, Vegas going to the Stanley Cup Final and being a great team in the regular season. I did not expect that whatsoever, but I did expect Seattle to start off well and to be a competitive team. I had them missing the playoffs, but being around that playoff race, around 88 to 90 points in that Pacific Division, which I think I predicted them to be fourth in the Pacific as well. I thought they'd be a pretty great team and be a competitive team that would be scrappy and gritty and be hard to play against. And although that scrappiness has been a part of the Seattle team, the wins have definitely not translated. Right now, they're 3-6-1, last place in the Pacific Division. And yeah, compared to Vegas' start where they went like 3-0 and had all this major success in the first couple of weeks, it's been the exact opposite for Seattle. And as soon as they were starting to get some momentum, now they've lost 2 straight games versus the Rangers and the Oilers, where they've scored 3 goals in 2 games. Not exactly a great start for a Seattle team that needed to get to a great start. Now, the Seattle Kraken are 3-6-1, 7 points, and last place in the Pacific Division. And it doesn't feel like the Seattle Kraken are playing like a last place team, but it does feel like they're playing like a team that's on the outside looking in and won't be a playoff team this upcoming season. And when you compare it to Vegas' start, where they felt like a true contender from day one somehow, it's a complete contrast. Now, the Seattle Kraken have had a ton go wrong this year in terms of the players, the play style, and the results, obviously, which has spoke for themselves. But it feels like for every player that's as good as expected for Seattle, there's 2 players that have been extremely disappointing and have just not been as good as they should be. Compare that to Vegas, where it seems like every single player was playing their best hockey ever. It's a pretty big contrast, and the Seattle Kraken have obviously been a lot worse because of it. Now, we'll get into some of those disappointing players in a bit, and some players also could be moved in a bit, but I wanted to talk about some of the results so far for Seattle that are also bringing some big red flags to this team. They're right now 25 goals scored up to this point, which is 14th in the NHL, but you also have to factor in that their goal scoring has kind of slowed down as of recent. In the last 2 games, they've only scored 3 goals, and it's obviously been not good enough to actually win games. And then you go into the goals allowed. They've allowed 33 goals up to this point, which is 28th place, and they have a -8 goal differential, which is also 28th place in the NHL. The goals allowed have been horrible, and I think a big reason of that is the goaltending, which has also been extremely disappointing. Now, you know how I was talking about one player being great and being as good as expected, and then 2 players taking steps back? Well, that's been a consistent trend when it comes to the scoring for Seattle. Now, the top 5 goes as follows. Jared McCann, who's played great this year, 8 games played, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. He has played as expected. You also got Brandon Tanev, who's been fantastic for them. 6 goals, 6 points in 10 games played. Now, I was talking about Seattle not having too many clutch goals this year, but Tanev has produced quite a bit of them when it has come. And then at number 3, you have Giordano, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. Schwartz, who also is another extremely disappointing player, who has 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points in 10 games played. Now, you have some players, again, that have been as good as expected. Guys like Giordano, guys like Tanev, who has exceeded expectations, and McCann, who's been as good as advertised. But then you have Jaden Schwartz, who is a big free agent signing this year and was their biggest offseason acquisition outside the expansion draft, and he has just not been that great. He was coming off a pretty inconsistent season in St. Louis and was coming off some injury luck, but in Seattle, it hasn't really come back to form with him, and he's been a guy that's been majorly disappointing and a huge reason why Seattle's top end scoring just has not really been there. Now, there's some other big guys that have come up through. Yanni Gourde has been great for Seattle when he has played. 6 games played to one goal, 4 assists for 5 points. But then you get into some of the disappointing players, in my opinion. And again, it goes back to the top end scoring. Guys like Schwartz not being good enough. But then we go on to Jordan Eberle, who has been another interesting player to look out for. In 10 games played, he has 2 goals, 2 assists for 4 points. And I thought for Seattle, if they were going to be truly successful, Eberle was going to need to be a huge offensive power play machine. And that's been the exact opposite of what we've seen so far. He has been lackluster, Schwartz has been lackluster, and that top line and top 6 has suffered because of it. Now, there's 3 other players that I think have been extremely disappointing, and these 3 players were also, I thought, going to be key parts of this Seattle team going forward, but have been the exact opposite in almost every single way. Vegas obviously had a ton of depth players that ended up being huge parts of the team going forward, like William Karlsson, and there was a couple of guys that I thought could be the William Karlsson for the Seattle Kraken, but they don't have anybody like that this year, and nobody, it seems, has stepped up to the plate to be that productive. Now, these 3 guys, I think, have been extremely disappointing, and they go as follows. At the 17th spot in team scoring is Morgan Geekie, 10 games played, 1 goal, 1 point. Mason Appleton, who's played 7 games with only 1 assist, 1 point. And then Calle Jarnkrok, who's played 5 games and has gotten 0 points on the year. 3 guys I thought could be major offensive pieces for Seattle and could have some great seasons. All 3 guys who I thought had massive potential. Jarnkrok was extremely underrated for Nashville last year. Mason Appleton, another extremely underrated player for Winnipeg last year. And the guy like Morgan Geekie, who showed great things with Carolina when he did play last year and started off amazing in that game versus Vegas, but has kind of trailed off in terms of his play. All 3 of those guys were looking amazing, and all 3 of those guys have come back extremely disappointed. I mean, 2 points from all 3 of those guys combined is horrible, and those guys especially need to be better for Seattle to have great offensive success. And then we go on to the goaltending, which has been about as bad as you could possibly want, honestly. And I have a Philipp Grubauer jersey, man. I mean, I want Philipp Grubauer to be great, but he has just been awful up to this point. We're talking about another free agent signing that was huge for them in the offseason that has come up with mixed results at the very best. When it comes to the goaltending for Seattle, starting off, Philipp Grubauer has played the biggest chunk of games, 8 games up to this point, with an .896 save percentage and a -3.28 goals hit above expected, which is 64th in the NHL right now, and that's not good. That is not good whatsoever. We do not like to see that. Then you go on to Decord, who's played 2 games, a .407 goal against average, and .855 save percentage. Then you go on to Chris Dreger, who's only played 1 game, but was also pretty awful with an .857 save percentage. No goalie for the Kraken has been good whatsoever this season, and although Grubauer has been the best, maybe even not, he's just been awful too. Every single goaltender has come up with bad results. And another part of Seattle's success that I thought would need to be there would be the goaltending. Will we see Philipp Grubauer continue his solid play from Colorado? Will we see Chris Dreger continue to be amazing with his play with Florida now on to Seattle? That was huge questions going into this year that have pretty much been solved and pretty much been in the negative for Seattle. But the goaltending has been another thing that's been massively disappointing, and it feels like they can't even make a move really because Grubauer is locked up, Dreger is locked up, and they're solidified with these guys. And especially with their starting in Seattle with the Kraken team, it's been not exactly what's been needed for Seattle. And especially when we factor in the bad top end scoring and the unclutch goal scoring, the goaltending allowing as much as they have is going to produce some losses, and it's done that so far for Seattle. But from pretty much every single angle, from pretty much every single viewpoint, this Seattle Kraken team is at best kind of meh. And we go back to the expansion draft and go back to what the Seattle Kraken had the potential to do. And I, even after the free agent signings, was still kind of worried with what Seattle was doing. But especially, if you guys remember some of the streams of the expansion draft, you would know just how worried I was with Seattle's picks. How low potential there really was for this Seattle team. And obviously, they tried to go back into free agency and get some big guys, but that's obviously not helped whatsoever. I mean, let's just look at the free agent signings for the Seattle Kraken. Philipp Grubauer, who's been awful, Alex Wennberg, who's been okay, and Jaden Schwartz, who's been okay at best. 3 top-tier guys that were signed to big contracts that have done jack squat. And we go back to the expansion draft. One of the main things that Ron Francis was emphasizing as a huge part of this team was cap space. Then they pretty much threw that out the window and went fully into free agency to basically supplement and get some sort of talent on this team. At least that was the plan. And now they don't really have that either. I mean, we go back to the expanded draft and some of the picks that could have been made. I mean, you could have had Vladimir Tarasenko, who has his 9 points in 7 games played up to this point. He was there for free with the St. Louis Blues. For free! And yet you still couldn't take the guy. To me, the expanded draft was extremely disappointing at the time and continues to be. I mean, with Vegas, at least they made big trades and got some big draft picks and were able to be pretty creative. Seattle made almost 0 moves around the expansion draft, and that to me was pretty puzzling. It just shows, though, that the Seattle team should have been way more aggressive than they were in terms of trading, in terms of draft capital. I mean, at this point, it feels like they were tanking all along, but they only have 1 extra pick in this upcoming draft, and I think it's like a Flames 4th rounder that doesn't even matter. So their draft is looking pretty samey compared to pretty much every other team. So they're not even tanking in that regard and trying to get as many draft picks as possible, which, if they're going in this average direction, could have been a real bright spot, I think, for them, but that's obviously not come into play. So from almost every single angle, it just feels like Seattle wants to be in this average territory, which doesn't make any sense to me. To me, with Seattle, you either needed to fully commit to a rebuild or fully commit to true contending. And they didn't really do either of those. I mean, they could have really accomplished a fantastic team or a team that could have gotten some amazing drafts over the next couple of years, but they really didn't do any of that. And that to me is the most worrying part. Oh, but wait, it gets even crazier. Going back to some of the potential moves that could be made with Seattle, there was rumors even this last week that Mark Giordano could be moved pretty soon. Now, Pierre LeBrun did an interview with Ron Francis, of course, GM of the Seattle Kraken, and one of the things that they talked about was Mark Giordano's future. And when it came to Ron Francis's view on it, and when he was asked if we could see a potential move of Giordano, he said this: "I think that's a decision that we make a little bit down the road here." And I mean, with how Seattle is playing, why wouldn't you just trade Mark Giordano? I mean, that's what we're looking at here. I mean, this would have been perfect if you were building a ton of draft capital and you were already a rebuilding team. Then you could add a Mark Giordano trade on top of that, maybe get a 2nd or 1st round pick or something, and have that big asset on top of the great picks you already have. But Seattle's in a position where they have none of that. They don't have the regular season success. They don't have the amazing, groundbreaking future. I mean, they've only had 1 draft. Their prospect pool is probably the worst in the NHL right now, even with Matty Beniers and even with some of those picks there. So the Kraken had real potential to just do whatever they wanted to do, and I just feel like they wasted a huge opportunity up to this point. I mean, the Kraken are still not done. They could have some more success in the future, but with the way the team is playing, I don't see them being a team that's any more than average. And in that Pacific Division, we've seen some teams rise to the occasion to be much better than expected, and I really don't know if the Seattle team has what it takes right now to be a playoff team. I would love to be wrong. I would love to see the Kraken make the playoffs, but it just feels like a huge opportunity is wasted with this team, and a huge opportunity to either be a great rebuilder or a great contender was just wasted after trying to do all this different stuff. I feel like the Kraken were just too careful, too concise, and too patient, and it's kind of bit them in the back this way. I do think the Kraken will be okay eventually, but that's just it. They're just okay and just fine. And in the NHL especially, but in all major sports, that's the worst position to possibly be in. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this kind of mini rant on the Seattle Kraken. I just feel like there was so much more that could have been done with this team, but I'll leave it with what I've said already. If you did enjoy, make sure you, again, comment, do whatever you need to do. Comment down below what you guys think of this Seattle Kraken team. What are your thoughts on how they played? What do you think they should do in the future? Should they rebuild now or try to contend as much as possible? Let me know your thoughts. Where do you guys see Mark Giordano getting traded as well on top of it? Let me know what you guys are thinking. Make sure you share this video with your friends, get it to any hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card right here for all of my hockey rankings content right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.